Hello everyone and welcome back to Term 3. As Ben said, we're looking at the big issues in our world in 2020. And this week and next week, we're going to look at the issue of racism. Now, I'm sure pretty much all of you have seen what happened with George Floyd in the US and the Black Lives Matter protests since then. But in case you missed it or in case you've forgotten, here's a quick recap.
It's now a global movement, with thousands taking to the streets, from Amsterdam to Paris, and around 50 cities worldwide since this weekend. In London today, protesters marched to say the UK is also plagued by systemic racism.
Protests like this one have sprung up across continents, in rich cities and in poor ones, but with one message, that racism is the other pandemic the world needs to address.
Rarely have protests over deaths in custody drawn so many Australians. Tens of thousands rallied in Australian cities, great and small. Their focus, hundreds of Aboriginal deaths in jails and police stations in the past 30 years, with no police officer ever found guilty. Here, the death of George Floyd has suddenly created widespread anger about an Australian problem.
I've waited too long for justice to be handed down for my people, and it's time for me to make a change in the only way that people are going to listen to me, and I'm going to do it peacefully.
So in a few minutes, we'll look at what the Bible says about racism, because we believe that God speaks to us through every circumstance, through what he has inspired in here. But first, I know that some of you will care deeply about this issue, while others of you might not be too interested about what happens elsewhere in the world. So let me quickly explain why this issue is so important. When we think of racism, we might think of the really extreme examples we see on news. People verbally abusing others on trains or buses or whatever, like this example in Sydney.
An unprovoked attack on another Australian bus. Two Asian tourists travelling past Sydney's town hall, racially abused by an Australian man.
All of a sudden I heard a man screaming, "Do you speak English?" And he just kept on saying, "Do you speak English? Why did you come into this country? You should get out of this country."
But while the man continued to yell obscenities at the tourists, other passengers sat in silence, some laughing at the incident.
I hope all of you would agree that that's horrible and always unacceptable. But at the other end of the spectrum are jokes and stereotypes about different races. You might think one end, the extreme stuff, is really hurtful, but the other end, the jokes and stereotypes, they're a bit of harmless fun. But let's listen to a few people in Australia and what they say about the less obvious racism that they experience here.
I think we've moved away from that racism of N-word in your face kind of thing.
It is not somebody who will come and tell you that, I am against you. No, it is not like that.
It's now very subtle and very behind and really sneaky.
It's definitely a death by 1,000 cuts. It's those little microaggressions.
A bunch of expressions and faces. Because I read the book whenever I'm on a train, and I'll look at someone, they just look at you like, whoa, you can actually read a book.
If you go to a shop and you want to pick something and somebody is, retreat and thinks, oh, I'm beside somebody who is not my color.
You'd be wondering, why would somebody who doesn't know me feel this way about me?
As a black woman, I have to be aware of my presence in every single facet of society that's dominated by people that don't look like me. I get on the train and I always have to script myself very silently on how I present myself. I should automatically make myself look small so that I don't incite fear in them.
It feels like you're outside the box, and it feels like you should hate yourself.
Dehumanizing, because you can never change your skin.
I'm in this beautiful circle, you can't be in it.
Systemic racism is everywhere. In 2013, researchers in Brizzy found that white bus passengers who said they didn't have enough money for a ticket were significantly more likely to be given a free ride than would-be passengers of Indian or African ancestry. In 2009, researchers at ANU found that job applicants with Middle Eastern or Chinese-sounding names were significantly less likely to be called in for interviews than job applicants with identical resumes but Anglo-sounding names. But the one that worries me the most is that right now, in Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are 15 times more likely to be imprisoned than non-Indigenous Australians. 15 times.
You're out there doing your own thing, you know, trying to live your life, and then you've got someone having a go at you because of, you know, who you are. And, you know, I think later on, like, I think if it happens to you like a few times, I think it has a massive, you know, effect on you. And, you know, you sort of sit back, you know, and you think about, like, you know, why are these people having a go at me because of who I am?
Yeah, mental health and racism, I think, do go hand in hand. It's whether you don't know if it's happening to you, you still feel very bogged down, you feel heavy, you feel like that everything you do is having to be a chore because you've got all these things to come up against as soon as you leave the house, whether it's with a taxi driver, shop, work. It's as soon as you leave that sanctuary of home, it's become quite heavier.
So hopefully you see that racism isn't just the problem in the US. Unfortunately, it's a problem here in Australia as well. So let's go off to groups now and see what God has to say about this issue.